Hi everyone, and welcome to African Art Part 2. So continuing after the Part 1 video where we last looked at the Venus of Willendorf. We are now moving into France, into Lascaux, and we are looking at the Great Hall of Bulls. So this was actually a painting that was found in one of the caves there, and it is from 1500 to 1000 BC or BCE. They were discovered in 1940 by 4 teenage boys and their dog following a landslide. As far as I remember, the story is that the dog ran in and the boys went to find him, and they found this great hall. So that was the exact room that they found of the caves. It opened up the mouth of the cave just above the village. And the boys decided to explore after enlarging the entrance. So the entrance wasn't very big, but they decided to look into it further. They climbed down into the cave. A few meters further into the hillside, they entered a large cavern. So this was the Great Hall. On shining their lanterns around the cave, they discovered that the walls were covered in strange paintings. So they found them in the middle of these caves that had actually been closed up. So the landslide would have opened up the entranceway, and then they would have made the entranceway bigger. They had reached what would become known as the Hall of the Bulls. So if we look at Paleolithic paintings, so paintings that come from this kind of time period, we are looking at cave paintings, paintings done on rock surfaces. So these would be the first paintings in human history. The best examples would be in Spain and France, so Altamira in Spain and Lascaux in France. They were created deep in caves and not easily accessible. So they're not just in any cave entrance that anybody walking past could see. They were actually quite deep into the caves, where the Paleolithic nomadic people would have gone in to find shelter. Remember, nomadic, they are moving around. They don't have homes. So they needed to find places for shelter. They would go into the caves, and that's where they would stay. And while there, they would create these paintings. The common theme is large wild animals, such as bison and horses. So bison is like a wildebeest almost. Okay, so it's this big bull kind of creature. And horses. Drawings of humans are rare and usually schematic. So in other words, they are not as realistic as the animals are. So usually they simplified down into symbols. Abstract patterns and tracings of human hands. So that's what the people would have been simplified into. Neolithic architecture. So things that were built during the Neolithic time. If you know the cartoons Asterix and Obelix, Asterix and Obelix are from the Neolithic time, and I think it's Obelix is this fat guy, and he is a menhir builder. So he actually is a character that creates these menhirs, which are tall single stones. So if you see a single stone standing up like this, so you can see there's a person standing next to it, you can see the size of it. So this is called a menhir. And then on the right-hand side here, we have a dolmen. So dolmen is 3 little upright stones, or 4 upright stones supporting a top piece. So if you want to have a quick look at the cartoon here, I'm starting to wonder whether we shall ever find that dolmen. Okay, the irony being that they are actually standing underneath it. Boo-hoo, poor metallurgics. We'll never be able to rescue him now. So they're trying to find somebody looking for this dolmen or dolmen, and they can't find it. Meanwhile, they are actually standing underneath it. So the first construction method is called post and lintel, and this goes with your dolmen. So it's that kind of construction. Posts being the downward pieces, upright rocks, and the lintel being the piece at the top. So Stonehenge would have been constructed like this. So you can see we've got our posts, so the upright stones. with the lintel at the top. So post and lintel. It is a cromlech construction, which means that it is circular. So even though some of the stones are not standing anymore, some of them are in ruins, it would have been a circular formation. There are actually 4 concentric circles, so circles within circles. Concentric means that they are inside each other. So we've got this red one here, then we've got the blue line here, we've got the red line again, and then we've got a small fine blue line in the middle there. So there are 4 layers of circles and a central altar. So an altar like you would get in a church where the priest stands, that is the altar stone in the center. So we've got the outside ring consisting of pairs of large monoliths with stone lintels. So the monoliths would be the upright pieces and the lintels. Okay, so monolith, lintel. So the outside, we can see them in this picture, have the biggest one. So it gets smaller as we're going into the middle. The outside ring has pairs of monoliths and stone lintels. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going all the way around. Okay, some of them are not standing anymore, but it would have created this big ring around the outside. The second ring consists of smaller Saracen stones. So these are actually flat. Okay, the blue ones would be the flat ones. And the third ring is a horseshoe shaped and consists of 5 pairs of monoliths with lintels. So you can see there's the fourth ring. Okay, so horseshoe shape. It only goes around here. This side here is open. So horseshoe shape, and we've got 5 pairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around the center altar. And the last ring, the fourth ring, has got the low stones again. It's also horseshoe shape. So you can see the inside blue little rocks there. In the middle, we have a large horizontal rock. And it's balanced like an altar. So that's why they call it the altar stone. Okay, so it's in the middle there, like almost like a table. The construction displays order and symmetry and harmony. So it was said that this was for spiritual purposes, and maybe rituals were carried out here, and it had a lot of connection to ancestors, to actually the spiritual world. Okay, so there's what I was saying. It is thought to be built for religious rituals and according to the sun at solstice. So solstice is, I think it's the middle of summer, and it is when we have the longest days and shortest nights, and the sun is at its highest point. It is unknown if astrology has anything to do with positioning. So there's lots of conspiracy theories that it lines up with stars, and there's lots of scientific research to look at how the stars would have been back then, because stars shift and move. So they have done studies to see if the Stonehenge actually lines up with the stars from that time period. Some experts have camped there for a whole year to record data. So they've actually stayed there for an entire year to see what happens during the year, how the sun moves, looking at the lining up of the stars and the moon and things like that. So now we're going to move into Africa. So that was all European. Okay, so that is where we started with these discoveries, and then people started saying that nothing was happening in Africa, and Africa was behind everybody else and not actually developing the same. So we're going to have a look at what they were actually doing in Africa during the same time period. So before we begin, you're going to do activity 2.2 on page 75 in your textbook, and you're going to do this in your theory book. So you're going to find out why the San people were called Bushmen. Again, I'm going to link in the description the answers for these questions so that you can see what my answers would be. Research the behavior that annoyed the early settlers in the time of Jan van Riebeeck. Write 2 paragraphs in your visual culture studies book in which you put an argument from the point of view of the farmers who had to import their animals and the San who had to hunt to eat. So arguments from each side saying who was right and who was wrong. So looking at the locations where our art was found. So majority of our art was found where eroded rock faces form shelters or overhangs. So we can see again here, because our artworks are again in caves or on rocks, we know that the people here would have been nomadic. They would have been moving, not having homes, having to constantly move in search for food. So rock art is considered to be only a few hundred years old, but stone tools have been found as evidence of earlier inhabitants. So the stone tools would be older than the rock art. Rock art is found all over the world. So you can see we saw Lascaux in France, and then we've got South Africa. We also spoke about Spain. And these artists had no contact with each other. So if you think about France, how long it would take you in an airplane to fly there, if you had to walk because that's what the San people would have had to do, you probably wouldn't make it up there in your lifetime. So they wouldn't have easily had contact with each other. Both had images of large, powerful animals, so you can see the same kinds of things are important to these cultures. They both had images of large, powerful animals, showing that that was what they needed to survive. And they had similar colors, materials, and symbols. So they were all sourcing their paints and their colors from nature. So their colors would have been very similar. You can see the top one here is Lascaux. It is the French one. The bottom one here is found in South Africa. So you can see the colors. Those brown pigments are the same. And they've got the same black kind of outlines used as well. The materials and techniques. So there are 2 different techniques used. Rock engraving, or they're called petroglyphs, and painting, called pictographs. So a petroglyph is carved in, and a pictograph is painted on. Pigments, if you remember from our first videos, okay, is coloring. So they got the color from clay, rocks, plants, charcoal, and guano, which is bird poop. So take the bird poop, the very white bird poop, and mix it in to create the color white. So they used animal blood, fat, and other natural liquids. They applied them in different ways. So they used flattened twigs, animal hair tied onto sticks, so like a paintbrush. And then they also used their fingers to paint in warm mixture and fat and hollow bones or reeds to release like a straw. So basically they would use a hollow bone or a reed like a straw. They could suck up the paint and then spray it out or drop it onto the actual wall or cave wall. Right, I'm going to continue the next slide in the next part of our African art. So continuing in part 3.